Hey everyone, we are live, and once again here Sunday evening, 7 p.m. Ghosts of Bacon. Um, Want to revisit our topic we talked about a couple of weeks ago, which was Drake's brass plate. And my good friend Chris Donah is with us. You probably remember Chris Donah from, I believe it was season 6 in 2019. He'll correct me if I'm wrong there. But he appeared on The Curse of Oak Island as an Oak Island theorist. He's a veteran uh, theorist who has been involved in multiple presentations in the war room. The guys on the island are well acquainted with his theories, and he just keeps coming up with some really interesting things. Has a great take on great new takes on information that we thought has already been dealt with. And this week, we're going to be looking at, like I said, Drake's brass plate. Talked about it a couple of weeks ago in my last show. He wasn't able to join us, but today he's with us. So everyone, please welcome Chris Donah to the stream. How you doing, buddy?
Thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. Because one of the big things was a couple of weeks ago. I did my best to try to present your information that you had presented to me.
You
And
did a good job. I watched the recording, and you did a pretty good job.
thanks, buddy. But I still don't feel that I really did it justice, because the kinds of angles and the details that you brought out, I don't think I really kind of delved into. And since then, you and I have kind of talked a little bit and found a couple more things. So what I really wanted to do was kind of put this out there for all of our viewers and people in the group. First of all, I want to welcome all of you who are watching here live. We have several of you here live. We got, oh my gosh, hold on, let me scroll through. Oh, some of our usual suspects. Daniel Spino, thank you. Michael Heron, good to see you again. Deidre, thank you for coming. Judy Wilmot Forsyth, you are one of our faves. We love your we love your rundown every week and summary of what happened on The Curse of Oak Island. You do such a wonderful job with that over there.
Yes, Judy does a great job.
Doesn't she do an amazing job with John Stemmer? So you guys have a great show over there. So what I want to do is throw this out there right at the very beginning. One of the big things that people had brought up before the broadcast I did a couple of weeks ago, they're all saying, well, wait a minute, you guys do know that was a fake. And yeah, we're well aware. It was scientifically proven to be modern brass. The thickness of the brass was actually uniform all the way through, not as if it would have been pounded. We know all of that data, but what Chris has found, I think, really kind of doesn't just automatically put it to rest. Say, okay, these guys, the clampers, they did this, and that puts it to rest. Well, I think there's more to the story based on what you came up with, Chris.
The Clampers is a very interesting group as themselves. I mean, it's like a comedy group / a cult, a Rosicrucian type of Masonic group. I don't know. They're
exactly what I was
strange.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and, if you would, please, jump in and tell people what was it that drew you into deciding to look at this brass plate, and kind of give us a preview of what you found.
Well, I was watching, all those shows like Curse of Oak Island, Scott Wolter's America Unearthed, and he did a one episode on Drake. And when I'm always interested in any of those kinds of shows, but when he showed the plate, and after a couple of years of work on the plaque, as you know, Jake, I noticed a lot of just similarities just looking at it. The lines looked very similar. The characters, the count, I could just tell the count on each line was very similar. And it just looked a lot like Shakespeare's Plaque to me. So I went a little further and found some other stuff that, I mean, it can't be. I can't say it's a coincidence because if they're right there and there's matching things, so
Well,
matching aspects.
especially when you and I have been staring at the plaque of Shakespeare's Funerary Monument
Mm,
for 2 years now, and it's ingrained in both of our brains. And so I can obviously see, when you sent me the image of Drake's plate, I saw it immediately, and then of
mhm.
course knowing the provenance of it, and the scientific testing that was done. For example, let's see. Daniel just asked, is it fake though? Was it fake though? I think the science about that specific plaque is definitive, Daniel. In my humble opinion, I don't see any way around that. My question is, was it based on an actual plate?
Yeah.
That's my thought,
It
because
was 1977 too. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't do a more, recent study of the plaque. I mean, with all the technology today, I know that speaking with Scott Wolter, a little bit correspondence between the two of us recently, he has been trying to get a chance to analyze the plate himself, and they have refused him access to the plate. So,
that is really, really interesting. Now, so I mean, those of you who don't know, Scott Walter, is the host of his own show. He's an amazing researcher in his own right. He does. How does he describe it, Chris? He's an archaeologist who actually studies the age of carvings and
he's a
rocks.
geologist type of. I don't know what would be his. He's a It's a forensics, almost like a forensic geologist.
Yeah. That's what that was the word I was missing. That's the word he uses to describe what he does, and maybe we should have him on at some point, because
Yeah.
if at all possible, because he's a fascinating guy, and I love his show, America Unearthed. Um, and the interesting thing is that you say that he reached out to them and said, "I would really love to, study this and do what I do looking at it."
Hmm.
And they said, "Nah."
Yeah. I mean, to
Wow.
this day, I mean, as of a week ago, he's still trying to do his own test to see if it's authentic or not.
That's
So,
just really interesting. And the funny thing is that uh, it seems to me that that if they were going to be completely transparent and scientific about it,
mhm.
they would just say, "Oh, hey, knock yourself out. We already know it's a fake. Go ahead, look at it." Right?
Right. And that kind of looks suspicious when they don't allow a scientist of Scott Wolter's credentials to
Exactly.
take a look at it.
Yeah. And once again, and so here we have Daniel once again bringing up a great point. Could it? Could part of it have been fake to alter its authenticity? And Michael, you hit the nail on the head as far as my take on it. Is it a recreation or a replica?
Hmm.
Uh, I- you know, Back before you even sent that to me, I was like, meh. The science is there. It's done. It's a done deal. And I think that the things that you have brought up, especially considering how closely you and I have really studied the plaque on Shakespeare's Funerary Monument, really raises some huge questions in my mind in terms of two things. Is this a replica of an original that is now in someone's private collection?
Could be.
I think that's an interesting question to
From what
ask.
I found, I don't know how it can be a fake, but I don't know. It's somebody had knowledge. So yeah.
Yeah. And so, um, one of the interesting things is that I also thought, well, could this have been, in the private collection of someone else, and could the clampers, just kind of be running interference? You know, again,
Yeah.
just possibilities. Hey, Tom, good to see you, sir. Glad you made it. Yeah, we had a great comment here. The Awoken one, once again, you guys should watch Hammerson Peters' YouTube channel because he has multiple compelling theories about who did what when on Oak Island, as there could be multiple money pits buried on Oak Island. Well, you're preaching to the choir there, Awoken one. Chris and I have been, in the camp of there are multiple sites on Oak Island for a variety of reasons. It's been used, in my personal opinion, for hundreds of years as sort of a deposit box. So, All right. And, oh, geez. Daniel, you're really keeping me busy tonight. Good job, my friend. The Bacon Pentagon was not common knowledge at that time. You are correct, sir. So here we have these guys claiming that they did it. What was it, Chris? Back at the turn of the century, early 1900s,
for that found that
the clampers.
Like 1920s, 1940s, that type of thing.
Yeah, they were saying that basically the Bancroft Library, all the guys who were associated with that, in particular the professor who was in charge, had a huge collection of books about the West Coast, California, the history of the Americas. And that's really what it was all about. And once again, more great questions, this time from Linda. So great to see you here tonight. Could the men who created the Drake fake have had knowledge of the funerary plaque to make their fake more real? And that's the other half of what I think is a possibility, Linda.
Question, I guess. Yeah, that's
if they were, as you indicated, Chris. I mean, if they were members of a Rosicrucian type fraternity that's all about like making jokes, but also valuing history and science.
Sure.
Would they have done that? I mean, I think that their guiding principles were they wanted to create plaques to honor history and protect orphans and widows, and they said especially widows. So I mean, it's humor, It's like,
I mean, they had names like I don't know. I'm just making these up, like Captain Kangaroo and all these. I mean, all these people in this organization all had funny names and
no, that was great. So the funny thing is that as we looked at this, and like I said, at that point, my mind was made up, and then you said, "Hey, you got to take a look at this, Jake," and you sent me that one image.
Yeah.
And as soon as I saw the Bacon Pentagon, and then I realized it was actually a pentagram too, I was like, okay, just the features of it, spoke to me in terms of, a cryptogram and cryptanalysis.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I've been doing here for the last couple of years. And so I said, okay, maybe the one that they looked at, was not authentic, but there are features of it that indicate that it was based upon one that was, in my humble opinion. But so I don't know. Do you want me to go ahead and queue up?
Go ahead. You can start it. And we can stop at any time and discuss any slide or whatever you want to do.
Sure. So I'm just going to go ahead and share this tab. And we'll go. Oops. Might want to start on the first slide, I guess, Chris. There you go, bud.
There you go.
All right. So
I like this. I like where little pictures on the side and presentation. This is nice.
So Daniel had just asked, was there a connection between John D and the plaque? And I'm going to let you answer that question here in a little bit. So as you know, we're all going to, just like a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about the message of Drake and also the funerary monument plaque, the controversial Drake plate. And, Professor Herbert Bolton's role in it, he was someone who was really, really looking for this plate. This is something that he put out to all of his students in his classes. And he says, hey, listen, if you are in the area of Drake's Bay, keep your eyes peeled for this thing because I really want it.
He was obsessed with Drake and the story of him landing on the California coast for sure. Yep.
Yeah, and with good reason. I mean, it's a huge part of American history, and so
sure.
Eventually, the plate ended up in the Bancroft Library, and then of course we had the whole hoax story that we were just talking about with the clampers. E-clamps is what they're called. And then Chris made this new discovery, and that's kind of what we're going to jump into this evening. And so what we'll do is take a look at some of the same features that he found. He found some of the same features in this plate as he found in the Funerary monument, and others have found. So since we know what happened with the Shakespeare plaque and Bacon, there was a lot of obfuscation there, a lot of people trying to kind of fuzzy up the history of that whole connection. Could the same thing have been done with Drake's plate of brass? So that's what we're looking at here tonight, gang, is this one right here. And so what I'm going to do, Chris, is we're looking at, there's a little problem here with the animation, and I'm going to pop out. We'll look at any questions and comments people have, and I'll fix this behind the scenes. I'll let you. Yep, there's my. That's right. Did you see that his legs are actually strips of bacon?
Oh, is that bacon? I thought he just had striped pants on. Yeah.
I was afraid people would think that, but it's supposed to be little strips of bacon.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, so John, glad you could make it, my friend. So I'm going to go ahead and fix that, Chris. And if you want to, can you see the questions? And
I can see some of the posts on the questions on the right-hand side. Yeah. Try and fix that, and I can talk about the plaque. I think the plate is very interesting in the sense that it was found near the shores of San Quentin prison, actually. It was right in that area. Scott Wolter believes that it makes sense to be in that area because Drake was also looking for the passage around the United States to the north, the Northwest Passage or Northeast Passage from that side. So he would have gone any bay like that, he would have gone into to investigate. So him stopping there in that bay makes sense. So him leaving a plate there is good, and the chances are good. Now, let's say, trying to look at some of the questions here. Somebody posted about the largest Rosie library in California. That's another situation that with the clampers, with the Bohemian Grove and the Rosicrucian out in California, makes you wonder if the clampers were some kind of beginning group of that out in California. So that's interesting that you said that. And then I don't know when the library was started out there, though. When it was started out in California, so I'd have to look at that date.
Yeah, I was looking at that earlier today, and I believe it was in the late 1800s. And so we have, a good friend here who's popping in and calling us gobbers.
Gobbers.
I love it, John. I love it. Thanks so much. I'm glad you could be here, my friend. And so, Michael, once again, another good comment. History claims Drake was buried in a lead casket off the Colombian coast. Doesn't his plaque, if authentic, mean he was buried off the California coast instead?
Could be.
What do you think, Chris?
Well, Drake is a very plausible theory for Oak Island, too. There's already been one person who presented on Drake being buried on the island. So I don't think he'd be buried on the island because he was a captain. I mean, he'd be buried at sea. He wouldn't be buried on land unless they pick the swamp as being his watery grave. I don't know, but To me, I would think that Drake was buried at sea somewhere. Now, why a lead coffin? I have no idea why that would be important. That'd be super heavy. I can't imagine how heavy that would be to carry on a ship. That would be.
Well, that's just it. That's what I was going to bring up. And as the Awoken one just said, or no, it wasn't the Awoken one. Sorry, Michael. History claims Drake was buried in a lead casket, but also other people believe that he faked his death. You know what? I don't think it means that he's necessarily buried off the California coast, because it's well documented that he traveled up and down the West Coast in the Pacific. He was the first British captain and admiral to navigate the Pacific to that extent. And so I don't think that disputes, where he was buried at sea. I do find it very interesting that people have been looking for his lead coffin for hundreds of years and still haven't found it. Don Brent's, good to see you, my friend. Glad you could make it. So I got that fixed, Chris. We're going to go ahead and take a look at that. Great questions, everyone. So let's go ahead and let you keep going with so what we have here is, I believe, Peter Amundsen's Bacon
Pentagon. That is in Shakespeare's Plaque, and the blue is Petter's. He introduced that in his books, maybe in the 2000s. He found it after 2000. Nobody had ever found a Bacon pentagram in anything up till that point. And I think the most important part of this is the Baron that is outside that I found. Baron Verulam was a title given to Francis Bacon by King James in 1618. As you know, the Shakespeare's Plaque has 1616 written on it, but it wasn't on the tomb until around 1620, and that comes from Peter Dawkins, who is really the modern authority on Francis Bacon and Shakespeare.
Are you still there?
What's that?
We lose you, Chris?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought it was a really cool find when you found Baron outside of Bacon. And the idea of his title, that particular title has the same cipher signatures of some of his true titles would have been had he been king. So I think that's, you have repeatedly made the comment that he was, very, very proud of that title.
He was. And
go ahead.
Like I said, it was 1618 when he got that title, which would have been 1620 would have been the plaque was erected at the tomb. So that would have been his last title that he would have been very proud of if Bacon did create Shakespeare's Plaque, that he would have put in there on the plaque. He was not Viscount St. Albans until after that.
Correct.
After 1620. So this dates the plaque. This really authenticates the date of the plaque.
I agree. I agree with you. I think you're spot on there. And I suspect that the reason why he was, so proud of that particular title was because of the cipher signatures that it also aligned with. But that's yes. My own personal feeling. So what you
just go back, Jake. That one thing I just want to point out. The only letters different, as you can see in that, are R and C in Bacon and Baron. I thought that was kind of interesting, being RC as the initials for the Rosicrucians. So, yeah, those are the only two letters that are different.
Good catch. Really good catch, Chris. That's too cool. So, one of the big things I think that you picked up on were all of the similarities between the plaque and the plate.
Yes. 8 lines, specifically, stay passenger from that line. It's really the 6 lines that start with stay passenger and down to wit. you're going to see some characteristics in the plate that kind of matches the plaque. It's called an 8-line poem. Is called an octave. Is that correct, Jake?
Yes, it is.
There is something to this because in the plaque you can see the first two, well, lines 3 and 4 with fast and plast at the end. You're going to see that the plate has her and her kind of like in the same thing, where at the top 2 lines, you're going to see the same ending in both plate and plaque. That is definitely something that is characteristic in both.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, the total number of characters, Jake counted with his system as being 305, and I counted 309 in the plate. Only 4 off difference. So,
wow,
very close. The characters in each line are very similar, and they're all like in the 30s, pretty much on both. Anywhere from 31 to 37 in the plaque, 30 to 37. But there's one that is 38 or 39 in the plate. And this is a good picture of, you can see the her and her in the top right, and then the fast and plast in the plaque. So those are similarities right there that I saw right away.
very cool. So immediately, this is something that I talked about a couple of weeks ago. And Chris, could you kind of talk us through like the way you discovered the whole idea of all of a sudden finding Bacon's name?
Yeah. Well, there aren't very many C's, and there's only, I think there's 6 or 7 B's. I can't remember, but obviously there's a lot of O's, A's, and N's in this plate. So what I did is I highlighted all the O's, A's, and N's in different colors, and with the B's and the C's, and I was looking for a pattern. And I just went to the plaque and I said, you know what? There's a Bacon pentagon in this shape and this orientation on the plaque. Maybe there's one on the plate. And sure enough, I just looked and I had everything highlighted on there, and it's the only one that fit. I looked all over the plate and I didn't see anything else anywhere that had anything close to what shows here. I mean, this is a very, very close simile of the one on the plaque, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I when you showed this to me, I was kind of blown away because even if you were to, find a bunch of random noise, spelling out Bacon, there's no way that you would have, the same exact configuration here as what you had on the plaques.
I mean,
amazing.
For sure. And the thing is that's kind of cool that he did here. Oh, well, I'll wait for that. I'll talk about that. I think you want to animation with the pentagram.
Really cool. When you spell it in order, it forms a pentagram, and it's again, the pentagon itself is the same as a plaque. We'll get to that image next, but I think one of the cool things that you brought up and that I talked about a lot a couple of weeks ago was that when he made this, he would Bacon, if he was involved in it, he probably would have been a teenager. And then later on, go ahead.
I think it was 16 years, 10 months when Drake left. Bacon was 16 years, 10 months. And that would have been like 18 years, just over 18 years old and 1579 when this was the date. Right. So he was just over 18. So, 16 to 18 years old.
Yeah. So, that's one of the big questions was, obviously if Bacon was involved in the creation of this plate, it had to be made before he left. Obviously.
It could have been. This plate could have been easily made prior to leaving.
Yeah.
He already had the name of what he's going to call the area, and it doesn't really, other than the date, maybe they had to put it on. But
Sure.
that was the only thing they had to really do.
That was going to be my next comment. They must have had to put on the date the day they
That's
landed,
it.
right? Yeah, that makes sense.
I
So,
think,
go
well,
ahead.
I think the Portuguese, what they did with the Padros when they traveled, they would have had it all carved out, and all they would have to do is some minor adjustments to the Padro. When the Portuguese had a land claim, they would have had everything there to just uh, put an upright stone that they carried with them with all the markings on it, all the writing on it, and maybe a date they would have to put on it. So I don't
Sure.
think that's out of the realm of possibility for this being done prior to
Well, that's
them
just it.
leaving.
Yeah, you would have had a prior way of doing it for sure. Yeah. And the thing that I liked was that what you had said to me was this is what he produced when he was, a teenager, even 18 years old, if he was involved, or 16 and a half or whatever, versus Shakespeare's Plaque, which is far more complex when he was in his 50s.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
maturity level difference for sure. I can see if Bacon is responsible for both. I mean, I can see him, doing this type of thing only. Obviously, the plaque that we've seen has quite a bit more, but given more time, I don't know if there's more uh, hidden aspects to the plate, but I think this is a good start, and maybe there are some more similarities as I delve into the plate a little bit more.
Yeah, great observation, man. And one of the cool things that you pointed out was also this involves his full name, which we'll be looking at in the final image here, um, where he uses the C in Francis. And so here's the pentagram. If you start with the letter B and you go to A, C, the O, N, and then back to B, it forms a
Yeah,
perfect. Yeah,
that's
just
pretty incredible, and you picked up on that. I had no idea,
yeah.
and you did
Well,
a great job of
oh,
uh,
thanks. But when you
finding
sent
that.
this to me, and I thought, well, wait a minute, this is an amazing coincidence if the clampers just made this up out of their heads.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's something that they would have been able to do, but yeah,
Or
I don't know.
and again, if they did, okay, suppose they did. Throwing this out there as a little thought experiment. If they did, what would have given them the idea to do this in the first place in the same fashion of Shakespeare's plaque of his funerary monument? I don't know. And
It's an
here's
elaborate joke. I mean, if they're playing a joke, I
it's
mean,
very very involved.
that would
And
have,
go
yeah.
ahead.
And I'm
Well,
just saying it'd have to be quite elaborate. I mean, it would have to take somebody who is extremely knowledgeable
and
of
not
that
only
time
that,
period.
and their professor friend, they would have known that these would have been signposts that he would be looking for.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
S-
don't think it wasn't a student that found it. It was just somebody else, right? I don't think it was a student that
Yeah,
found
it wasn't a student. It was somebody else who eventually was talking to a student. The student said, "Oh, you need to go talk to the professor." So,
it. Yeah. Interesting.
so here's the next slide where you're talking about D's connection. Um,
Oh, let's go back one with the Francis.
okay, go ahead.
That here's the in green is the Bacon pentagram, but he uses the C in Francis to make his full name. I think Jake already said that, but I mean, using the C in Francis, that's also another elaborate aspect of this. I think that's important with Francis Bacon. Also, the letter C is 100 in Roman, which is the total for Francis Bacon in the simple cipher, with 33 plus 67 equals 100. So he's been known to sign his name with just a C too.
Correct. Wow, very cool. So here's the connection that you made with D. Um,
Yeah.
if you want to jump in and go ahead and talk talk to people
Well,
about that.
just talk about D, Bacon, and Drake, the connection. Obviously, they all lived at the same time. They were both all involved in Queen Elizabeth's circle at the time. Dee and Queen Elizabeth were close in the sense that Queen Elizabeth was very interested in the occult type of knowledge, that kind of esoteric knowledge that Dee possessed. So she invited him into her court. And Bacon being a teenager, and Dee's background of being a tutor for teenagers in that sense, he had already had experience in that. I think that Queen Elizabeth seeing over Francis Bacon's education would have had Dee tutor him in mathematics, navigation, all these aspects would have been taught to Bacon from Dee.
Yeah,
Now,
Dee wrote the quintessential book on navigation. Yeah.
in 1576, right before Drake went on his voyage in 1577, Dee wrote that book on navigation. And I can see Drake, Dee, and Bacon all in the same room. I don't know why, but I can just see them all in the same room. Possibly, Bacon being a teenager, maybe in the background, but with Dee and Drake talking about things, with Bacon, maybe in the background or as an apprentice or learning as they go, type of thing. So, I mean, they all knew each other. They had all spoken to one another. There's no doubt about it. So I think that Dee early on in Bacon's life, maybe not later, but Dee, I think, was more of an influence on Bacon as a young teenager. And I think that since the plaque is really about Bacon's life, as we've kind of like a biography type of thing, he included Dee in here a couple times. Dee's secret code name was 007, and G is 7. That's what's in blue there. This is part of a bigger thing up in there. There's a ship in there, but I think that Dee might have been on the ship that brought Bacon back to England, but and had something to do with that. But Dee was part of Bacon's life early on, and I think he included him in this, the plaque and plate. But in the plaque, you can see DEE in the death, and the end of Shakespeare. So there's a couple D's in there. Not that it couldn't be just a random happening, but it's in there. And there's a couple of reasons why I think the DE in death and the E in Shakespeare is a reference to John Dee, but I don't have time to get into all of that. But
well, I was just going to say, sometime we really ought to get into, your whole, what you found in relation to my work in terms of the ship, Dee's role, and all of that, because I mean that's definitely a show in and of itself.
Yeah.
But we have this here just to kind of put it in the context of what you found in Drake's plate.
And this is the plate. You can see the same types of use of Dee's name, and it's actually they're kind of in the same spots almost. Not the GOO or the 007, but the D's in the plate and the D's in the plaque are kind of in the same parts. So the same locations. So, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's
use of D.
It's an interesting correlation for sure.
Oh,
so
to get back to the pentagram too, I did the forward count. Oh, we didn't get to that yet. I think you have a slide coming up on forward. There it is. I took a look at the Bacon pentagram and I added up. This is the forward count. This is starting at the top left, and I counted down to 309 all the way to the bottom right. But I did count the numbers for the Bacon pentagram, and they added up to 1007. 1007, which is strange, but yeah, that's what they added up to.
So yeah,
1007.
so you have a 1 representing the letter A, which is a symbol of light and seeing.
Yep.
So C007. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I didn't expect that to happen. I just wanted to see what it was, and yep,
So to be clear,
1007.
people who are familiar with my work know that I counted the characters on Shakespeare's Funerary Monument Plaque, and you did the same exact thing here with Drake's plate,
Yep.
and again, it yielded results. That's pretty interesting. Very cool, Chris. So one of the things that you just followed up with me and messaged me the other day were, one of the things that the features of this plate is that certain letters have lines drawn vertically, through the open spaces in them. And then sometimes, the same exact letter in a different place doesn't even have a line. So as those of you who have been following my work know, that when you have a difference like this, that's a significant clue. And it usually means that you need to pay attention. So let's go ahead and jump into what you noticed, Chris, and what you found.
Well, I noticed that the only letters that didn't have lines were P's and R's. And I counted the P's. There's 2 P's and 5 R's that don't have that. Now, we have talked about the numbers 2 and 5, how 25 comes up all the time.
Yes.
But there's also B's in the top, the word B, B-E-E, the top left and the bottom right.
Right.
Now, in the plaque, there are many roses that are hidden in the plaque, and there's always a B next to every rose.
Right.
And I can show you that at some other point down the road, but there are like several roses or rosies, and then there's a B always right next to it. So we have B's here, but when you multiply the number for P, which is 15 in the simple cipher, and you multiply that to the R, which is 17, you get 255, which is B-E-E, spelled B.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
That is really interesting. What's funny is you showed this to me, and I said, wow, again, I think you're onto something. But 255 is also the value of the letters of Rex Francois and Queen of Scots, both in, I think, K cipher, if I'm not mistaken. And when you sent this to me, what I did was I did the addition. And so since, like you said, there are 5 R's and 2 P's, 5 R's equals 85, 2 P's is 30 in simple cipher. That equals 115. And I thought, well, that's not anything. But what other differences are there in any of the letters? And there was just one that I found, and that was the letter D. When you go through this entire plate, everyone, there's only one D that actually has a line in it. The rest of them do not. Now, since D is the letter 4 in simple cipher, you add that to it, and there it is right there in Drake, nonetheless. When you, in case you didn't see that, here's D and Drake. And again, throughout this entire plaque, there's multiple letters D, and this is the only one with a line in it. So differences are clues. I added that 4 to the 115, and of course we have 119. And that is the reverse cipher signature of the name Francois. Could be just a coincidence, gang.
Who knows? I mean, it could be anything. It's just
it's pretty interesting, considering the fact that one of the big things that people ask me about this kind of cipher work is, couldn't it just be a coincidence? Are you reading into it, that kind of thing? And that's one of the big things I try to safeguard against is, just engaging in confirmation bias.
right.
Just seeing what I want to see, right? And Chris, you do the same thing. You're like,
Yep.
I need to be skeptical. What do we do? But when you have, multiple examples of what should be just one coincidence, but they keep piling up within the context of someone who would be associated with Sir Francis Drake. In fact, these one of the cipher messages I uncovered and solved in Shakespeare's funerary monument ciphers
Hmm.
was the fact that Francis Bacon was Francis Drake's navigator for a time. And so these guys knew each other, and
No, they definitely knew each other.
Bacon and Drake knew each other very well. So we'll just keep kind of going here, Chris. So here are
Yeah.
the problems, more of the problems that, rise up when we're, considering the idea. First of all, the metal analysis of this plate. This is modern brass. And a lot of people keep kind of questioning that, whether or not that was kind of like flawed or whatever. My personal opinion is, this is definitive. I think that the brass that they analyzed was modern. It's science. I don't see a reason for the people who are analyzing it. The people who analyzed it wanted it to be old. They wanted it to be
Yeah.
authentic, and they found that it wasn't. So, speaking from experience, having, while I was working on my book, um, there were things that I was hoping I would find, and I didn't. And then I found information that was completely contrary to it. And so, in my mind, when that happens, I think it's definitive. But also, the plate itself had a uniform thickness of brass. Okay, as if it was a very modern creation. If it were created in the 1600s, it would have been pounded, and it would not have been this uniform sort of thickness. And so, they saying, "Oh, it's fake." Oh well, that's kind of the way history has kind of dispelled and dismissed this artifact. And my question is, well, given all of this, evidence and Chris's discoveries, is it fake, or was it just a replica? I think that this is a question that we need to look into, and it deserves, a closer look.
It does.
Yeah, looking at the timeline of it, this is another problem. Bacon was in France in 1577. He didn't return to England until 1579 when Sir Nicholas died. Uh, Drake was at sea that entire time, so
But
he
it
couldn't.
is weird that he was left England for the first time right during the time that Drake left, and he came back in the same year that Drake came back.
That's a good point, Chris. Very good point. So but and as another possibility, people have documented, Bacon being in France with the people that I believe were his, other family members, based upon, my work. But, perhaps, that was also, a fake little paper trail. Who knows? Um, but so he couldn't be present. And if he were, then he wasn't in France.
Well, it'd be hard. I mean, there's lots of accounts of him being in France. I was just trying to make a point that it's just weird that.
It is. And again, it's something that needs to be looked at in terms of the timeline of, how can we kind of trace his steps as he goes through France?
Mhm.
Was he in France, or was he traveling around the world? Kind of like our friend CRC and the Fama, which I'll be talking about at the end of the show.
Yes.
Um, so there's a possibility that, it was made before Drake even left, like we talked about earlier. So one of the things that you and I have talked about, Chris, is that do you think this could be a cover up, in terms of what's happened with throughout the years of the research about Bacon as Shakespeare? Or there have been a ton of things, obfuscations. There have been documents that have been forged. All of these kinds of things in
Mhm.
relation to Shakespeare. Do you think you could have something similar to that going on here?
Could be. I mean, I just don't know. I wish there would be more. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a hard paper trail to find and to authenticate and everything. So a lot of these documents from the past, I'm sure they're out there, but they're under lock and key in the British government, or they're, somebody's private collection, like you said, or It's not out on, you know, for the public. It's not out
Right.
there.
And when you have a group like the Clampers, what was their role? They could publicly say what their role was. Now, what they claim is that, by the time, they couldn't just divulge to their friend, hey, listen, we did this to just,
Yeah.
goof on you, and then they were, the phrase that I read earlier this morning, preparing for the show was, they couldn't do it in public to their peril. I'm like, oh, come on. That's a little uh, to their peril. They would have been embarrassed, and they would have embarrassed their friend who ran right out and authenticated it and said, look what I found. It's like, yeah, buddy, guess what? You didn't. Um, I think the word peril was a little extreme there. And so, there's been a ton of defacing evidence. There have been forgeries. Like I said, is something similar going on here? I don't know. But here we have Mr. Bancroft and his library. They were the ones who it still is on display from time to time in the Bancroft Library at Berkeley, which I think is pretty interesting. And so, since he was involved in making the largest collection of Western history, okay, anything that had to do with the Western states and the frontier and the Americas and the West, he was running around having the professor like collect all this stuff, right? So, could they have found the original and just kind of kept it and had a copy made? And there it is in someone's private collection right to this day. Who knows? That's a possible explanation as well.
Isn't the Clampers have something to do with that? About something about being the West, the history of the West, and kind of like the same kind of line. It's like
absolutely. They were all involved in that sort of mindset of everything about the history of the Wild West there, and so really pretty. I think you've raised some significant questions here, Chris. I really do. So what I want to do is we're going to pop it back here. Saw a lot of questions like flying up.
Oh yeah, I've got
a whole bunch of them. Oh, here's an interesting one. And Michael, I know you asked this earlier on because I was kind of flipping back and forth between running the slideshow and doing this. But if Drake had traveled from east to west, would have exclusively traveled by sea or expeditionary on land? If by land, would he have left markers? What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was customary. I mean, Dee was pressuring Queen Elizabeth to claim land in North America. He was really pushing it, and I don't know why, whether it was a Rosicrucian type of philosophy that he was just trying to get her to do, but he wanted to claim North America for Britain. He tried just about everything to get her to do that. And Drake, if I know he met with Dee probably before he left, and I'm sure that it was land claim was one of his, primary objectives was to claim land for Britain. So
yeah, and you had John Dee and Francis Bacon both were also in that same boat. Yeah, good thoughts.
Well, I mean that was part of the deal. Is when you traveled, you put a marker on the land that you wanted to claim. So
right, which is the whole purpose of this plate.
Yeah,
even though it's fake, in and of itself. So I think it's a really good question, Michael. In my own personal opinion, Drake was a sea captain and one of the most successful privateers in British history, English history, and so I think he was traveling by sea and then landing on land and sending out an expeditionary force to lay those markers. But I think he was primarily traveling by sea. It's just my thought.
It could have been just stopping for water and supplies, and wherever he stopped, he put a land claim down. Maybe there's others. I don't know.
Yeah. The Awoken one, and this is I'm posting this. This is such a great question. It's one I get all the time, specifically in light of my work and my book. Given the amount of Shakespeare's works, I wonder, would it have been possible for Francis Bacon to have had the time to write those books and keep it secret from everyone? Just saying. The answer is yes. That's the short answer. Yeah, it was possible. And in fact, he didn't keep it secret from everyone. He had an inner circle, in particular, Anthony Bacon, I believe, Robert Devereux, second Earl of Essex, his cousin and friend, a handful of people who knew definitively that he was responsible for it, and they helped him. Ben Jonson, a fellow playwright, spent a great deal of time living in Bacon's house.
Yeah.
So yeah, they all were in the know. They knew it, and he did have time to do it. See, as moderns, one of the things that we think is, that one person could not have done that in one lifetime. But what we don't understand is that they did not have the distractions that we have today. They didn't have the infinite capacity for distractions where we seek out distractions. I mean, basically what Bacon would have been doing, not to poo-poo what I'm doing here, he would not be sitting here at home watching Chris and I talk on the internet. He'd be writing plays and sonnets. So you have to remember that we do things differently today than what the way they did it then.
Right.
And they would be burning candles late into the night. And if you read my book, you'll see that Bacon spent a great deal of time at sea. When he was supposed to be home in bed sick, he was traveling the world, and you have a whole lot of free time on your hands when you're a navigator on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's plenty of time to be writing. So again, Michael, or Awoken One, great question.
I think he had help, though. I mean, he had a bunch of very talented friends who were also writers. I mean, I can 100% see them pitching in and doing their part.
100%. And I think that they were the periphery of what would have been considered to be the Rosicrucians.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, Daniel, great catch. Not a coincidence, in my opinion. Tom Burns certainly appears to be deliberate. Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to dismiss when you see all of these correlations.
Mm-hmm.
So
you can't say definitively, but I mean, they're there. So.
Oh yeah, they are. Hey, Don, good to see you. And let's see. Daniel, good question. Was it Francis or Anthony in France? They were both in France. Anthony was in France after Francis was. And when he returned, he kind of returned in disgrace. But luckily, he was friends with the King of France. Apparently, his stepbrother had connections there, as far as I'm concerned. And he was able to get out of there. And when Anthony returned from France, he lived in Francis's rooms at Gray's Inn, where they set up a scrivener's shop. And so they employed a bunch of writers writing things such as plays, letters, and ciphers. So basically, Anthony and Francis were both pivotal in Robert Devereux's second Earl of Essex's spy network. So they were feeding information directly to Queen Elizabeth. So it's a great question. And so, wow, I'm having a tough time keeping up with all of these questions. Woken One, you're very welcome. I'm glad. Yeah, there's definitely a connection there. For sure. And yeah, Tom, that we were just kind of talking about that idea, and Chris just brought it up, but Anthony and Francis both had, a whole group of secretaries and writers working for them in their scrivener shop where they were just churning out stuff. So absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Great questions, gang. Anyone got any others?
I don't see the YouTube side. Is there a YouTube side to this, or is it just all Facebook questions?
I'm getting them on both here on StreamYard.
Okay.
So
I'm only seeing the Facebook side. So
gotcha. Yeah, I've got the Awoken one on Face or on YouTube side, and Ray. Here's what Ray says. Ray D. No coincidence, true stranger from fiction. All the world is a stage. It's funny you say that, Ray. That's going to kind of lead into the segue of what I'm going to be getting into next week in terms of Bacon and all of his aliases, because what my hypothesis has become of late, getting into my work, we'll get into here before the end of the show, here wrapping up here in a few minutes, I think, is that's exactly what Bacon did. Was the world was his stage. Think of he was actually doing real life LARPing, live action role play. He would assume a role, he would become that person, and he would go to a place and he would be that person. He would then write letters to himself under various names. And so, and he would write back to himself under those other names. It's just kind of a pretty crazy web of some of the things that I've been kind of unraveling. And the fact that you said that all the world's a stage, that's going to be one of the main quotes that we're going to be revisiting here in this particular podcast, I think.
Jake, there was one, the Awoken one asked a question up a little ways. He said, in my opinion, Francis would have been in a lot of trouble if he had taught using a pentagram. But the thing is, on a pentagon that a lot of people don't know, he would have used it because he had 5 letters in his last name, which is perfect. Mm-hmm. But also in a true pentagon, the angles within the interior angles are 108. Correct. So Francis, in using the reverse cipher, is the number 108. So I don't think he really thought of it as maybe a pentagram, but he used it because of those numbers, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing too, we have to remember that back then, a pentagram was a geometrical image that didn't necessarily carry all of the esoteric sort of meaning that it does today. Some of that's been, kind of, forgive the pun, conjured up here in the 1960s in particular. But yeah, you're also keying in on Awoken One, what the reason why a lot of this was done in cipher. So I think what you're alluding to there is that if the church knew that he was employing this as a symbol to represent himself because of the very reason that Chris just mentioned, yeah.
But also, you got to think about Dee's influence in the play at the time. I mean, we're talking very early in Bacon's life. Dee was into this stuff. This is what he was into, the dark stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So if he was teaching Bacon these things, not that maybe Bacon later on in life kind of like, I'm not doing this anymore, because the Pentagon in the Shakespeare's Plaque is not like that. So again, I think we're seeing young Bacon versus old Bacon. People change, and I think it was just Dee's teaching to Francis that maybe the pentagram came up.
So. Could very well be, Chris. Good point. Daniel, do you believe Drake and Bacon were Rosicrucians and Freemasons?
I don't see why not.
Yeah. Based upon what I've seen, Daniel, one of the cipher texts that I haven't published yet, states that Bacon makes the statement in one of the transposition ciphers that his Fama fraternity evolved into Freemasonry, and so the short answer, I guess, is yes. Without getting into, I mean, that one topic alone, I think, is probably worthy of a couple of shows. And Jenny's getting in with it. I'm glad you were able to join us again tonight. It's amazing how multifaceted some of Shakespeare's one-liners are. They still apply today. To be or not to be is one of my faves. Along with Rosie. Yeah, absolutely. Jenny, the thing is that what's funny is Hamlet's Soliloquy is by far one of my favorites, and for a variety of reasons. I also, used to torture my students with it I would force them to to memorize it, 8 lines in, and just because. But the thing was, when they were done, they actually appreciated it, understood it, and actually enjoyed the whole process. And if you haven't seen it, I have a post on Facebook about the to be or not to be line and how it's actually a Bacon signature. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad you mentioned that. A couple more questions here, Chris. Here's one for you, bud. What are the chances, in your opinion, that Drake truly was in that bay in Oregon and made those markers? What do you think?
Well, I mean, the maps show that he did travel there. It's not, he did circumnavigate the world. So, I mean, there are accounts that people that were there and he did do it. But it's just, those fine details about that trip, there's not, I just wish that, they would have kept a better, maybe because some of it was secret. I don't know. But it's just the time. It's just, you can keep a diary and a journal or whatever, but it's not like, well, we stopped in here in this bay and put a plate down. And I mean, they did mention something about that, but
They did.
it's like, the coordinates and, just the time, it's just different. And, I wish that, you could have more detail in their trip, but yeah, he was there. I mean, he circumnavigated the world. It's just, the question is, did he make that plate? Did he put it in San Quentin Bay? Did he put it there? That's what we really want to find out. And I think I just wish Scott Wolter would get a chance to investigate that plate a little bit with his skills and see what he has to say. And I know what I found, and I don't know if anybody could just make up something that and have those aspects so similar to Shakespeare's Plaque. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Chris, because like I said, at the very beginning of this, I was very skeptical. Not skeptical. Well, okay, not a skeptic. I was skeptical. I'll put it that way. A skeptic would just dismiss it. But everything that you brought forward and threw on the table, I because of the amount of time you and I both have spent with Shakespeare's Plaque, I saw it. I could see it.
Yeah.
The strange characters with the lines through them. I knew it had to mean something. And at the same time, I had this, terrible sense of cognitive dissonance because I knew that, that physical copy of that plate, I'm still with the science guys. And a lot of you, I know, want to, and that, again, that's your choice. You want to come up with reasons why maybe they didn't make a good decision there. That's a possibility too, gang. But at this point, I have to go with the science, and which leads me to believe that either the clampers have a knowledge that goes back through a tradition where they understood everything that was going on with the plaque, Shakespeare's Plaque as well, and incorporated those things into this plate, which I find to be less feasible than the idea that it was actually based upon an original and that it's actually a replica. So, I mean, that's where I'm at.
The clampers need to be an area that really need to be investigated. Yeah, because you don't know their background, and I don't really know much about them. I don't know about you. I just know the basics, but they seem kind of a lot more than what they portray.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And so once again, yeah, Jenny's right on it. I think the witchy meaning of the pentagram has been created by Hollywood mostly. People in the 1500s before, it was used in some of Dee's work where he was supposedly communicating with angels. I don't buy into that. And again, I'm one of a very small number. I'm in a minority. Most people believe that he really was, trying to communicate with the angels. I think that his angels were the spies out in the field and he was sending the messages, but that's just my 2 cents.
But that was even later though, too, after with Dee, you mean? Yeah, that was actually later after after he had kind of given up on Elizabeth trying to get North America or whatever. So, but
Sure.
yeah, he kind of went off his own path and traveled through Europe on his own, and that's when he came into the darker side of things too. So,
Sure. Julie, D used a triangle delta as a signature, so it may be linked because of geometry. Yeah, for sure. The other thing he did, Julie, was he used as Chris mentioned, the 007. But the thing is that the something I mentioned on a previous podcast is that the O's were actually, he used to sign some of his letters to Queen Elizabeth as her eyes. So the O's were eyes, and the 7 was actually the letter Daleth in the Hebrew alphabet, which is the same as delta, and it looks like a 7,
yeah.
and it's the same letter as D, his name. So yeah, great observation, Julie, as usual. So, and once again, Daniel, right on top of things here with the historical aspect of it. He's great with bringing up the facts that Drake's log of that voyage disappeared. Funny how that works, guys.
Oh, it's somewhere. But
Yeah, it's probably in the Smithsonian in a box right next to the Ark of the Covenant, like in
yeah,
Indiana Jones.
it's buried on Oak Island. What are you talking about? That's where it is.
Yeah, okay. You know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
So listen, guys, a lot of you are yep, totally get it. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys are really great for tuning in here, and especially since I do it so sporadically every 2 weeks. But next week I'm going to be doing one on Sunday, because 2 weeks from now will be the 4th of July, and hopefully everyone's going to be out celebrating the birthday of our great country here, and celebrating our republic. And so one of the things that still talking about the plaque. A lot of people are talking about how it's outdated science and current testing would be more definitive. Daniel, Chris, and Scott Walter both agree with you 100%. And so the whole thing is, pretty interesting. Anything else, Chris, before I jump into a teaser for what I'm going to get into next week?
No, just thank you for having me on, giving me a chance to explain my small bit of research on the plate and how it corresponds with the plaque. I think it's important, and I just appreciate you giving me the time and the.
I appreciate you coming on, man, because I did not do it justice a couple of weeks ago. I mean, the everything that you brought out tonight was above and beyond anything I could have done on my own. So I appreciate you being here very much.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Anytime. Hey, Michelle, happy Father's Day to you too, except for you're not a father. All right, gang, here we go. What I'm going to do is give you, before I sign off, it went a little longer tonight than usual. Thank you so much. So many of you have hung with us here, hour and 14 minutes, 15 minutes. I'm going to real quick kind of give you a little teaser of what I have planned for next week. And I think that people are going to enjoy this. Now, this is not a big dog and pony show, but one thing I really want you to pay attention to is that, yes, it is going to be next week and not 2 weeks from now. And I'll be putting out a couple of reminders in my Facebook group and my Facebook page between now and then. I'll be making an event so that it will be on everyone's radar. Okay, so that being said, we're going to be jumping into the Fra Rosicrucians next week and the Fama. And so what I'm going to be talking about is the invisibility of the invisible order of Rosicrucians. Why are they so invisible? And so one of the things that most people think about with the fraternity of the Rosicrucians are the signatures that are so common there with that people pay attention to. For example, Fra Rosicrucians is the common spelling of it. that people look at in terms of its signatures. And so in simple cipher, these letters total 157, whereas in reverse, they total 168. And in K cipher, they equal to 87. So as I was looking at it, and I was diving deeply into the FAMA, I'm sorry, and Fourfold is something I've been getting more and more into, and something I had never tried before. Fra Rosicrucians, Chris, this might interest you, equals 193. That's a number that we've come across several times, and we couldn't figure out what it was.
Yeah, right.
But there we go. But the other thing I noticed was in my work that I'm going to be presenting next week, the letters FRA actually represent the name Francis. And so what happens when we just look at the signatures of Rosie Cross? Well, interestingly, the simple cipher of Rosie Cross in this familiar spelling is 133. The reverse signature is 117, and the K cipher is 211. There is a name or a title that Francis Bacon should have had that is a direct correlation identically to these numbers, which is King Stuart. In simple is 133. In reverse, it's 117, and in K, 211. So in the name Fra Rosicrucians, well, we'll keep looking. I forgot this was coming up. Fourfold Cipher, what's going on there? Well, the way Fourfold Cipher works is you look for pairs of letters in the order that they appear in the word. And so the first letter is R, and so you find another R. And so when you have more than one letter, you pair them up. There are 2 R's, 2 O's, and 3 S's in Rosie Cross. And left over are I, C, E. And so when we correlate these letters, RR in Fourfold is 41, OO is 38, SSS is 66 in Fourfold, and the remainder letters are the same as simple cipher, 9, 3, and 5. The total is 162. And it wasn't a cipher signature, but then I realized that they represent the letters A, F, B. And I think we know whose initials those are.
I think, he used a lot of like 126, 162 for his initials. I've seen that in my research on the island too, which I can't. Hopefully be able to see it.
Hopefully we'll be able to talk about that soon, Chris. And so basically, the name Fra Rosicrucians, does it equal Francis, King Stuart? And so what I decided to do was to kind of delve into the characters from the allegory. Can we identify any of their true identities? And I think the answer is yes. Can we identify the author of the Fama fraternity? I believe the answer is yes. And so that is what we're going to be jumping into next week, gang. So
can't wait.
I hope you're going to enjoy that. And I think you're going to find it very interesting. And so that's really what I've been sinking my teeth into lately. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to dig into some of the stuff a few people have been sending me. I'm talking to you, Judy, and a couple of others. I'm going to do my best to get to that very, very soon. So, Chris, thanks a lot, man. This was really great.
You.
Your info is just always so good. Just keep it coming, man.
More to come.
All right. Yep. By the way, I do have something I want to talk to you about tomorrow. Maybe another collaboration that I think you're going to find pretty interesting.
Okay.
All right.
Well, let me know and I can stop over.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Thanks for hanging with us here for one of my longest ones so far. So great
Thanks,
question.
everybody.
Appreciate it. Tom signed 45. I love it. All right. Have a great night, everyone.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jake.